Okay, since my background is very noisy, I'm not going to give a lot of discussion, but one of my first project at ASDRP was COVID sleep. I feel honored to have that project, and basically that project proved that the high school researchers are capable of running human studies just like any other researchers in universities, as responsible, as awesome as any other grad student. So I'm very proud I had this project. This project is almost ending. We're writing a paper. We have gone to Society of Neuroscience and presented there. We had a lot of positive feedback, and hence the continuation of that project from COVID sleep ended up to become COVID AIDS. And I started a new project this term as COVID AIDS. So I'm not going to talk much about it, and Shreya is going to take a chart of it.
Yep, thank you for that intro, Sahar. Okay, so our study is going to be analyzing the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown on dietary habits. Presenters are myself, Sneha G, Suhani S, and our principal investigator is Sahar Janaki. So like Sahar said, we're going to be going over both COVID sleep and COVID eat, two different studies. First, we'll cover the methodology, results, and conclusions of COVID sleep, and then we'll go over the introduction and purpose, progress, and next steps of COVID eat. First, COVID sleep. So just for a quick overview and timeline of our study, in summer of 2021, we compiled articles relating to COVID-19 effects on the general public, particularly with sleep, behavioral patterns, and lifestyles. Then we researched outlying factors that could also contribute to poor sleep quality, such as addictive substances and over-the-counter medication. Then in fall of 2021 and spring of 2022, we created consent forms for participants. We requested and received IRB approval, and then we did a round of dummy data collection in order to ensure that our HIPAA-compliant JotForm platform would work to collect data. And then we began real data collection. So our outreach consisted of creating a flyer. After creating this flyer, we posted it in downtown areas, we sent it to family and friends, and then in order to increase our demographic, we even sent it to college professors of psychology around the United States. We also posted on online platforms such as Nextdoor, Survey Circle, Poll, and more. There are 4 parts of our questionnaire. First, consent. After a participant filled out an interest form, they received a long and short consent forms. Then eligibility. This was to remove outliers from the study, so people who would have their sleep quality affected by factors other than the COVID-19 vaccination. Third, we had demographic questions, which included basic questions about a participant's background, such as age, race, gender, vaccination status, and more. Finally, our sleep questions. These were based off of standardized sleep assessments, such as the PSQI. They were scored off of a scale from 0 to 3, with answers being never, rarely, sometimes, and always. In order to manage our data properly, we set up strict protection systems. We created tables within JotForm that would automatically hide PHI data, such as names and emails, but still allowed us to see the SQI, or Sleep Quality Index data. We also had an elimination process in order to ensure that our data was correct. We removed all incomplete surveys and removed repeated responses for quality control checks. Now for results. So as you can see, we had 159 participants, 72 of which were eligible and 59.7% had improved sleep quality. In the bottom left box plot, we can see that the average sleep quality index ended up decreasing. It went from a mean of 30.5 to 28.82, which suggests a slight improvement in sleep quality. There was also an overall shift of the SQI scores to lower values post-vaccination, with a decrease of the first quartile from 25 to 20, again seen in the bottom left box plot. Then the histograms on the right also highlight a distribution of participants' sleep scores before and after vaccination. Whereas few participants had sleep scores below 20 before vaccination, the number of participants with a score below 20 almost doubles after vaccination, as shown in the bottom histogram. We also compared the sleep quality of male and female participants. The average age of male versus female participants was similar, although there were significantly more females in the study than males. Overall, males had a greater average SQI improvement of 14.25% compared to a 0.38% in females. However, female participants did see more drastic changes in sleep quality post-vaccination. The highest improvement and decrease in sleep quality for female participants was by 25 points and 18 points respectively. However, for males, the highest improvement and decrease was by 20 points and 3 points respectively. There are a variety of other factors that did not have a statistically significant relationship. These factors include, but are not limited to, age, sex, vaccine provider, and vaccine and booster combination. Again, there were no significant differences in sleep quality between vaccine providers, such as Moderna and Pfizer and BioNTech. Additionally, there were no statistically significant differences in changes of sleep quality between the different vaccine and booster combinations. This data shows that certain vaccine and booster combinations were not more effective than the others in improving sleep quality. In November of 2022, the COVID sleep team was accepted to present at the Society for Neuroscience International Conference in San Diego. As high schoolers, we got to present to undergrads, PhD candidates, and experts in the field. While at SFN, our team gained valuable experience on how to effectively present our research. We observed and interacted with dozens of experienced scientists, expanding our knowledge on both the impressive field of neuroscience and even our own study, because many curious listeners asked us new questions about our findings. It was overall an amazing experience.
Now we'll be switching over to discuss the COVID EAT study. This study recognizes the importance of nutrition and the effects that one's diet has on their overall health. We also know that over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, people's day-to-day life changed significantly, and with that, several of their dietary habits were altered as well. COVID EAT is designed to collect and analyze data regarding how people's dietary habits changed during the lockdown by looking at data from before, during, and after the pandemic. Our overall purpose is to educate the public about their health and how the COVID-19 pandemic may have impacted it. We began our study with a literature review where we read research papers on the impacts of the COVID-19 lockdown on dietary habits and examined the results of different studies to get an understanding of what our study might look like. For example, one of the papers we read was about a study conducted among Quebec adults during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it found that during the lockdown, stress affected people's desire to eat, mostly increasing it, the frequency of eating out and grocery shopping decreased, and the purchase of frozen or shelf-stable items increased. Another study we read about examined dietary habits in adults living in the United States 3 months post-quarantine. This study found that with the increase in home confinement, the consumption of sweets and processed meats on average increased, and the nutritional value of the food consumed declined. Throughout the different studies we read about, we noticed some common factors that were being analyzed, including changes in stress, frequency of eating out and grocery shopping, the nutritional value of the diet, people's physical activity, and weight. So these were some of the topics we chose to focus on when we began creating our own questions to base our study off of.
So after this, we looked at 4 other popular questionnaires that were commonly used to diagnose eating disorders so that we could make our own survey questions. So the first one that we looked at was the SCOFF questionnaire, which is a 5-question screening instrument that can be delivered in a verbal or written format to identify potential eating disorders. So each question in the SCOFF assessment addresses different aspects about the eating disorders. And it has topics about body image, control or eating, weight concerns, and the importance of food in a person's life. If the responder says yes to more than 2 questions in the SCOFF assessment, then it is possible that they have an eating disorder and are recommended to go to a health professional. The next test we looked at was the E26, which is an eating attitudes test and is most widely used as a standardized measure of eating disorder symptoms. Anyone scoring more than 20 on the E26 should go to a health professional because that indicates problematic eating habits. The test asks questions about diet and problematic eating habits, along with behavioral questions, covering topics such as binge eating and dieting, self-control, body image, exercise, and weight loss to identify potential eating disorders. The next test we looked at was the CET, or compulsive exercise test, which is a 24-question test that assesses whether someone has problematic exercise habits and does it too much. The maximum score on the test is 120, and the greater a person scores on the test, the more eating disordered the exercise habits are likely to be. The test covers topics such as avoidance and rule-driven behavior, weight control-based exercise, the amount of improvement in mood based on exercise, lack of enjoyment from exercise, and exercise rigidity. Finally, the last questionnaire we looked at was the EDEQ, which is a 28-question tool that assesses the extent and severity of eating disorder symptoms. The test uses 4 subscales, which are restraint with eating, concern about eating, shape concern, and weight concern. Each subscale is given a score, and there's also a global score combining all 4 subscales. Higher subscale and global scale scores indicates greater severity of symptoms, and a global scale of 4 is considered significant, and when a health professional should be asked. So far, we have used the literature reviews we read and the questionnaires we made to create our own questions and survey. We have modified questions from the assessments to fit the purpose of our study, tracking the healthiness of people's nutritional habits before, during, and after COVID-19. While we are incorporating revised questions from previous questionnaires, we are also making questions specific to our study. For example, we are including questions about beverage intake, the change in the amount of fast food versus homemade food during COVID, how grocery shopping frequency changed, the changes in exercise and going to the gym, and also how having less access to doctors affected people's nutritional behaviors and health. We're also working on developing a standardized scoring system for our questionnaire so that we'd be able to properly measure the results when data is collected. In the future, we plan to finalize our questionnaire about dietary habits in relation to the pandemic and how the scoring system finalized and ready to go. Afterwards, we're planning to create consent forms for participants in the study and request IRB approval to conduct the study. After getting the approval, we'll be able to start data collection and send out the questionnaire to participants across the country. Then the data will be collected and analyzed, and we will begin summarizing the results and creating a conclusion. Hopefully, we'll be able to publish our results in a research paper available to the public and help them gain a greater understanding of the effects of COVID-19 to our dietary habits.
We'd like to thank our teammates, our advisor, Sahar Jahanikia, and ASDRP. We'll be happy to take any questions in the chat.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I am so proud. I'm so honored to have this research with, doing this research with you guys. Also, I'd like to thank Shreya. Shreya is from COVID Sleep, who's leading the COVID EAT as well. Shreya, thank you. This presentation was great. I hope another successful project followed by the COVID Sleep after also getting the manuscript submission. Thank you, team. I'm excited for this study. It's going to bring a lot of insight about dietary impact of COVID-19 on our life, and hopefully there'll be a conclusion out of it. So I'm going to leave it to the other people to ask questions, but I want to thank you again one more time. Great presentation. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. This is Bharat, and I would like to congratulate you, group. A very nice, clear presentation, and then doing research on the current pandemic. You know, it is affecting the whole world, and my question, is that. Can we assume that such kind of pandemic might influence our feeding habits? Or maybe, feeding habits sometimes it differs if someone is sick due to other reason as well, whatever the disease will come, people probably not eat what they are eating before when they are healthy. But how you think that the COVID, after getting infected by the COVID, the people fooding habit changes, but how and why they change it? Any idea?
So rather than determining COVID-19 as an illness, its effect as compared with other illnesses, we are more focusing on the lockdown. So the psychological impact of the lockdown rather than the illness impacting physiologically, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So the fact that all restaurants and schools and workplaces and such are shut down and we're all at home. So that's more what we'd be focusing on.
Oh, so you mean, one thing is that before probably they might eat, go and outside. But after the pandemic, maybe the people remain inside the house. They started, this is very important. They started cooking themselves. Even some of the, if you do have the backyard, and then they started growing vegetables themselves as well. That might be very interesting as an agriculturist for me. And I heard, many IT engineers, IT people, they went to home and they started working from the home. And then they started, in the leisure time, they are doing the backyard gardening of the vegetables instead of going to the supermarket because of fear of the COVID. So indirectly, they influence to go towards the, better food habit. And that is a good lesson learning maybe for, all people. This is wonderful finding. So I hope you can include in your research that indirect effect, something like they started maybe you may not have that questionnaire that is maybe not included in your questionnaire, that do they started their own gardening to get vegetables? But significantly, yes. As far as I know, many people told me that is growing themselves. So nice, is wonderful. The result might get something, for the society. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That's definitely something that we'll take into consideration.
Right, yeah.